in Washington to talk about government waste. And I'm glad. I think that's a good thing. It's become in vogue to talk about inefficiencies and reducing spending. And I think that's a good thing. I remember when I first got here back in 2017, one of my early Appropriations Committee meetings, I was green as a gourd. We'd just passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. I thought to myself, you know, we're going to run some deficits for a while because we just cut taxes. And there was an item in the budget for I think a 3 or 4% automatic pay raise for our federal employees. They get it every year. I'm not saying they don't deserve it. A lot of people deserve more money. I've never heard anybody around this place stand up and say, I've got a bad idea and I need money for it. It's always a great idea. So I'm not begrudging the federal employees, but I said, you know, I told my colleagues, I said, you know, we're going to run deficits. Maybe we ought to skip the pay raise this year. And I made a motion. And I remember some of my colleagues looked at me like I had a sexually transmitted disease or something. I mean, I made this motion, and I didn't think it was that big a deal. I don't know how many members on the Appropriations Committee there are, 35, 40. I got 2 votes. Everybody else suddenly had an important message on their phone. So I learned a good lesson. You know, I like to say my mother didn't raise a fool, and if she did, it was one of my brothers. But I was a fool then. But I'm glad things have changed, and I hope we follow through. Now, government waste takes many forms, but I'll tell you one form. It's the purest form. It's when the federal government has taxpayer money, and it doesn't belong to the federal government, but the federal government refuses to give it back. And that's the case we have at the Department of Treasury. I don't want to be too hard on my friends at the Treasury because they've come around. It's taken 8 years, but they've come around. The Department of Treasury is holding $95 million, not 950,000, 95 million unredeemed and fully matured savings bonds. I'll explain what that means in a second. The value is $38 billion. Now, there are only 335 million Americans. So this is probably not realistic, but if one unredeemed bond, if you assess one unredeemed bond to one individual American, that's 30% of our country. Now, what's a matured, unredeemed savings bond? A savings bond, as you probably know, Madam President, is just a loan to the government. That's all it is. You want to invest your money and you want to help the government. Say you want to, in World War II, we sold a lot of bonds to help pay for World War II. You say give money to the government, and over a long period of time, usually 20 or 30 years, sometimes 10 to 15, at the end, you'll get back money plus interest. So it's not like a regular bond where you get quarterly interest payments. You give your money to the federal government takes your name and address, you get a piece of paper, and at the end of however long of a bond you buy, say 20 years, you get back your principal plus interest. A good example is there are all types of savings bonds, and I don't want to get too far down in the weeds, but let's take a double E U.S. savings bond. Okay, let's suppose I buy one. I go to the federal government. I give the federal government $200. They take my name. They take my address. They give me a sheet of paper. Used to they'd give you an actual bond. They don't do that anymore. And I say, great, I just invested $200. In 20 years, I can go back to the federal government, and they will give me $400. My original $200 plus the interest. It's a great deal. It used to be parents would buy savings bonds for their children. And during World War II, government finance part of the war, selling savings bonds. There's just one problem with this scenario. I've known this for a long time. The federal government has $95 million, $38 billion worth of savings bonds over at Treasury. They have the names and they have the addresses of all of these people. And the people who are owed that money, many of them are dead. But when those bonds matured, they didn't come get their money. And you say, well, that's cool. That's okay. You know, if you gave them $200, it'll just keep earning interest. No, it won't. It becomes interest-free. If I buy a 20-year bond at the end of 20 years and I don't come get my principal and my interest, I don't get any extra interest. And for a long time, the Department of Treasury has had the names of these 95 million people or their heirs, and it totals $38 billion. So, naive as I was, I went to the Department of Treasury and said, you know, we need to give this money back to people. What's the problem? You got names, you got addresses. After a while, you didn't have to be Einstein's cousin to figure out they weren't going to cooperate with me. Now, finally, I want to give him full credit. I got Secretary Mnuchin's attention. I mean, I understand Steve was busy, wasn't a priority. But he directed his people to cooperate with me, and some of them did and some of them didn't. And then President Trump got defeated, and Secretary Yellen came in, and Secretary Yellen she tried to help, but a lot of her people opposed my idea. So I finally just went and passed a bill. I passed the Unclaimed Savings Bond Act, and I want to thank President Biden for signing it, directing Treasury to give people's money back. I mean, how hard can this be? Well, after I passed the law, I went to see the folks over there, and they said, well, there's a problem we didn't tell you about. All these records, these names and addresses are in storage, and they have to be digitized. They're just a mess, okay? They have to be digitized. I said, okay. I went and got the money put in the budget to digitize the records. And we've done that. About 97% of them have been digitized. And then Treasury said, you know, it's not really our job to go look for people. We can put up a toll-free number. I said, here's what we'll do. I want you to cooperate with the states. Every state has an unclaimed property program. What's unclaimed property? When a business or government, it's supposed to be the case, has your money and they can't find you, they can't keep it. If you go rent an apartment, for example, and put down a $1,000 deposit and you move, that apartment owner is not supposed to keep your $1,000. That apartment owner is supposed to turn it over to the state treasurer, and the state treasurer, all the state treasurers do a wonderful job. They put your name on a website, and people can go and look up and see if they have money. Every state has an unclaimed property program. I mean, it's old bank accounts, it's stocks, it's bonds, it's mutual funds, it's royalties, oil and gas royalty payments, it's health insurance proceeds, it's old tax refunds. And every treasurer, you can go to their website and put in your name or a friend's name and check and see if they have money. When I was state treasurer, I had the program, it's a long story, when I was state treasurer and even before then, when I was a state tax collector, we returned about $400 million to the people in Louisiana. Now, so there's an infrastructure set up. Treasury doesn't have to do a thing, not a damn thing. And again, I want to give Secretary Mnuchin and Secretary Yellen full credit because they've been great. But it's been hard to get some of their people up off their ice-cold, lazy butts. But we passed a law, we've got the records digitized, and my purpose of being here today is to try to tell folks after 8 years, we are going in this summer, in about 6 months, we're going to take all those digital records, names and addresses, and they're going to be sent to the state treasurer in every state. And the state treasurers are anxious to put the names and the addresses on their websites. They already publicize their programs. They're going to encourage their people to go to their state's website, and if they have an unredeemed matured savings bond, or more likely their mom or dad did, or even their grandmother, and they can prove that they're the child or the grandchild, as the case may be, they can get the money. They can get the money. And I know some folks at Treasury are upset about me. They loved having $38 billion of taxpayer money sitting there on the books that they can use. But it's not right. You can call it waste if you want to. You can call it inefficiency if you want to. I don't care what you call it. It's not right. So this summer, I'll be back to tell you when we turn the program on, but we're going to send 95 million names out to every state treasurer in the union. They're going to start giving this money back. And I hope all people have to do is go to a website and check their name, and the treasurer will take it from there. And I want to thank Secretary Yellen, and I want to thank Secretary Mnuchin for working with me on this. I want to thank President Biden, and I want to thank President Trump. And I want to thank the people at Treasury who cooperated. And I'm sorry those who made it so difficult did, but we finally got it done. So thank you. I think I did that quicker than 30 minutes. And with that, I either yield to Senator Durbin. Well, he doesn't want to speak, so I suggest the absence of a quorum.